Have one? No problem, my friend. Just hit the subscription button below. Come on in. Hello, everyone. DFG here, Gideon's Flight. Hey, guys, what if I told you that the top 1% of the population in the world owns 45% of the wealth? Let me say that again. The top 1% of the world's population own over 45% of the, let me correct myself. Own 50%, it's an accurate number. As I always tell you, check out. 50% of the world's wealth. And that 64% of the world's population makes less than $10,000 a year. Now I'm going somewhere with this, okay? And again, let me say that again. 64% of the world's population makes less than $10,000 a year. Okay? Less than. And yet the top 1% owns 50% of the world's wealth. You're talking about a wealth gap or wealth disparity. I don't think it can get any worse, than that. But let me carry this conversation even further. And I know some of you guys saying, well, how can it be 50 and the other one is 64%? So that's an average. How do they come to that average? That's a good question. I'm taking it that. Well, I'm sorry. I guess they're losing $10,000. I guess because I guess if you went down to the 50% of the world's population, you may be talking about $7,000 or $8,000 a year. But let's bring this on in, because obviously I would not call you into this conversation. I ask you to participate in this conversation with me by hearing me out, by telling you something that you may already know about the world's economy, so forth and so on. And because at the end of the day, what does it matter to you and I? Well, here's where it comes down to. I was listening to some information and research that validated that if you're making $15 an hour, right now, you may be looking at and feeling like, this is ridiculous. How am I going to make a living on $15 an hour? Well, guess what, my friend? You're not alone. 40% of the population here in the United States make $15 an hour or less. 40%. So if you want to extrapolate that out, that's less than that's $31,000 approximately a year, about $600 a week, or about $120 a day, or if you're working an 8-hour day, $15 an hour. Okay? 40% of the population is in that kind of situation. And I bring that to your attention because I think it's important to understand how this is affecting not only where we are economically in terms of the future and the hope for our children, or as how our children, what kind of opportunities that our children can look forward to in the future, because as we know right now, a lot of our kids can't even afford, to move out of home. And those who are in college are still trying to figure out how they're going to pay off their college debt, especially at $15 an hour at an average income. And we know they're going to school to bring that up. But I bring up these numbers because for us to be sitting here, for this nation, the richest nation on the planet, all right, to have almost half of its population making $15 an hour, it's an insult to all of us as citizens of these United States of America. It's an insult to us. We look at a situation. I was looking at healthcare, give an example. Right now, $88 billion was borrowed from banks last year from families because they could not afford to pay their health care costs. $88 billion. 65 million Americans just didn't even get any health care at all. They just said, forget about it. I'm not going to worry about it. I'll get better. Hope I'll get better. I guess they, said maybe they changed their diets, felt other means, vitamins, etc., to figure out how to weather the storm. But they couldn't even afford. They just said, I'm just going to leave it alone altogether. 65 million Americans. And this is an important number. And I bring this to your attention. And before you, get all in your feelings, some of you guys, because, I'm going to give you some information. And I don't want to be accused Well, you can accuse me, you can call me whatever you want to call, but I'm not a socialist. But when you look at countries like Germany, France, Japan, the United Kingdom, all of them have universal health care programs. And now you may say to me, well, okay, where are you going with that? We can't afford that. Well, can we? What if I told you that over the last 2 years, and this is under the Trump administration, 2018, 2019, Donald Trump approved $80 billion for the last 2 years for the military budget increase. That's $160 billion would it be? Now, I just told you a moment ago, $88 billion was borrowed by your fellow citizenry to be able to pay the health care costs, and yet we, or our government, signed off by Congress with the support of Donald Trump, spent $160 billion additional dollars. Now that may not sound like a lot, but when you think about what our overall military budget is for for this year, 2019, $1.3 trillion. That's trillion with a T. $1.3 trillion. And to give you an idea how that stacks up, the next biggest competitor as far as military spending is China. China spends $160 billion a year. That's what they're going to spend in 2019. And then, $175 billion is what China's going to spend in 2019. And then right after China is Russia. And Russia is going to spend $70 billion. We're going to spend $1.3 trillion. And the second country with the largest military budget is going to spend $175 billion. So we're going to spend almost 10 times more than them. Yet we have people who are probably dying or going without because we refuse to provide something as basic as health care to every American. And I know some of you guys will bring up, this whole, again, let me go back to this Bernie. I don't know about Bernie. I think Bernie Sanders is a part of this universal health care. And I know Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez in that group. Well, I don't support Bernie Sanders because Bernie Sanders told me as a Hebrew Israelite, African descendant of slaves. I'm sorry, not an African, an American descendant of slaves, that he didn't feel like my ancestors vested enough in this country to provide a recourse or what we call reparations for their grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren so that they can at least get up to the starting line to have a fair shot. So me and Bernie Sanders, whatever else he stands for, I don't give a care about because he's showing the basics when it comes down to economics, food on the table, a roof over their head. He doesn't give a damn. Cortez, that group, again, they're they're young, dumb, and stupid. They don't know what the hell they're talking about. But when it comes down to something like healthcare, I think that is important. I think we should be looking at it from a standpoint that, why would an American citizen be expected to finance a $1.3 trillion military industrial industry, but at the same time, if they get sick, if they don't have health insurance, then they could very well, die right out in the streets. Now, that's something that we should all be concerned about. That's something we should all be talking about. Now, let me paint one more picture for you. And this is going to get a little hot here. And I'm talking from a revolutionary. How many of you guys have heard of the French Revolution? The French Revolution started right about 1795, 1796, and it went into the early 1801, 1803. That was really the hot time of it, that 5, 6, 7 year period. This was during the time that King Louis the 16th was king of France. And King Louis was so preoccupied with his own opulence, living out in Versailles, his palace out in Versailles. I'm sorry, yes, Versailles, and moved away from the main population in Paris. And what happened in Paris, two people rose up and started speaking against the king and all of the, what we would call today, the elite group, who, matter of fact, in that time, they said that King Louis was throwing away enough food a day that could have fed 1,000 Frenchmen. But he didn't care. Marie Antoinette is famous for the quote, "Let them eat cake," when they were talking about not having enough bread and, to make bread and they had enough bread to make bread and cake. And she said, well, then tell them just eat cake. That's not true. She didn't say it, but this was all during that time. Total insensitivity to what was going on. So two men rose up. One man was a journalist, an editorialist, writing articles. I'm going to call him our modern day Sean Hannity. And this guy started, his name was John Paul, I want to pronounce this, Marat, M-A-R-A-T, Marat. And he started writing a lot of inflammatory things about the royalty and how that the people needed to rise up and all of the elite all over the country should be gathered in and they should be, brought to trial for treason and beheaded. And he started off with this kind of negative rhetoric. And guess what? Over a period of time, it caught on. And then you had another guy who was a great orator. His name was Maximilien Robespierre. Maximilien Robespierre. I'll call him the Cortez, the Bernie Sanders. The people are the people. Okay? Who's over there talking about, we the people have to stand up and we have to come together and we have to fight. And I know I'm right. These are the Ilhan Omars of the world. You follow me? They know everything, but they know nothing. But anyway, those two guys got together. And by the time they were done, King Henry, the 16th, who pretty much didn't listen to anybody in his cabinet, ran off all the talented people around him, started making decisions without getting good information, and ended up investing money into America's Revolutionary War that France could not afford and put them into a deep economic depression. And with the writer Hannity, we're going to call him a rat, the social justice, the Cortezes and the Sanders came together. And before you know it, old King Louis XVI didn't have a head. And not long after, a few years later, nor did Marie Antoinette. And I say this in terms of, because King Louis XVI, let me say it like this. Okay, we'll play it safe here. And I'm about to get to the end. King Louis XVI, reminds me some degree of our current president of the United States, without saying his name. The person who said he was going to drain the swamp looked like now an anaconda in the damn swamp. Because I don't know about you guys, I don't see anybody draining anything, but I see money going out all over the world, sponsoring war, sponsoring other countries, involved in other countries' affairs like we were promised he would not be involved in. And yet all the swamp is still around him, and the only people that he drained or got rid of were the people he brought on board with him. The people he hired, those are the only ones that he's fired, if you think about it. There's nobody else that was there prior to Trump that he drained the swamp and got rid of. So the swamp man is the anaconda man. All of this is said is, guys, pay close attention to 2020. And also, I'm going to say this to you. You need to talk to your representatives and let them know. Either change comes by righteousness or it can come by the sword. And I suspect they don't want that change to come by the sword because we the people can bring it on.